Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Navid, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Hi, Mary. I have been super excited to have this conversation with you, and I'm stoked to get going.
I absolutely agree. So let's get right into it. And I want to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Yes. So, oh gosh, I have fond memories of that time. I was at the young age of 14, and believe it or not, I was a paper boy. And so that was my first job. It really I learned a few things next to making sure that the right neighbor gets the right newspaper. But other than that, it really taught me a few things on resilience. I was living in Hamburg, Germany at the time, and the weather isn't always kind to you just because you happen to have to work on that day. And also, I learned how to be more friendly with those customers. And believe it or not, at one point I was tipped more than I was actually paid for to deliver the newspaper. So I clearly learned a few lessons along the way.
Oh, that sounds like a really good experience. But mentioning resilience means that wasn't always easy, but still a lot of good experiences.
Mhm. For sure.
So where did you go after your paperboy days? Can take us through your education and maybe your first professional job.
Sure. So I have an unusual background in that I first worked for 6 years before I actually went to study, which is actually more common in Germany. Some people are on the back end of their university entrance exam. So after finishing school, they go on and do what is called an apprenticeship, eine Ausbildung in German. And that I did not do, but I really felt that I had done enough of books and teaching and reading and library. And I really was ready to get myself, immersed in the world of work. And that's what I did. So I did the first 3 years, I worked in a retail outlet similar to what you have in the US called Foot Locker. It was a different chain, International Sports. And I learned how to deal with customers. I learned how to sharpen my sales skills. And then after 3 years, I switched gears and I worked for another organization, more dealing with B2B clients. So I was really keen to see how some of the skills that I had learned in the B2C, kind of with regular end customers, is applicable or not to corporate buyers. And I did that for another 3 years. And by then, I think the pressure from my family grew beyond my levels of resistance. So I had to start studying something because everyone in our family is an academic or used to be one. And so I studied international management. That's what I did. 4 years, it was taught in English, which was a very new thing back then in Germany. To study in English was considered something very strange and unique. And yeah, on the back end of that study, I worked for the world famous Three Stripes, Adidas, or Adidas as you call them in the US. Did that for 3 years, loved it. Had my first assignment in the US. I worked in the beautiful city of Portland in Oregon,
Mhm,
where the Adidas headquarters is based. Also, the Nike headquarters,
mhm,
Weaverton, isn't far from that. And then I came back and moved companies, moved to GE. At that time, GE was the world's most admired company, literally on the planet, but it wasn't really for me.
mhm,
I have good things to say about GE. It just didn't work for me culturally speaking. And so then I moved on again to another company called BAT, and then they hired me in Germany, sent me to Iran, and then from there on, I was promoted to Dubai, to London, back to Germany, to Bayreuth. Then I moved on to Switzerland, worked for a pharmaceutical company, Roche, top 10 pharma company, and had regular business trips to the US, San Francisco, Genentech. And then I moved to Vodafone, which was the last company I used to work for. I worked there for 8 years 3 years based out of Germany, and 5 years working in the global head office, partnering with our group CFO and looking after 27,000 people in 24 markets. And that was before I jumped ship and to do what I do full time right now, which is coaching, speaking, and a little bit of writing on the side.
Wow, what a whirlwind. I mean, when I think about all of the experiences that you have had, moving, cultures, companies, traveling, was that something that you always wanted to do as a young person, go out and see the world or, some people are homebodies. They live and die in that one place. And so has that always been a part of your spirit or?
It has been indeed. And that is one of the sad reasons I decided to hand in my resignation with Adidas because when I came to Portland, Oregon, I came back and talked to my boss and said, so when am I gonna go next? And she said, oh, this was very unique. My colleague, my counterpart in Portland had to go on maternity leave. And so I just filled that seat for 2 months before she returned. And she said, look, in the HR function, we usually don't do international assignments. So I realized in a very sad way that my chances of getting out of the country with Adidas were close to zero. So that's why I decided to join GE because they took me in their global HR leadership program, which meant that every 8 months you would be rotating in a new business and oftentimes in a new country as well.
That's a really wonderful bit of self-knowledge to be in a place that you like, but it doesn't align with what it is that what you want out of your career, what kind of experiences, what kind of life that you want to have. And so I could hear it sort of like mourning this good experience, but staying true to what it is you actually want to do.
Yes, and allow me also by saying that I was young and inexperienced, right? So I think just saying no to a fantastic company and a fantastic opportunity career-wise, it takes a lot more consideration when you are married and you have children and you have a mortgage to pay down and so it was really easy for me in those years to say, you know what, and same with GE, right? I mean, I moved from my beloved company to a company that I really desired to work for, and then once I had joined them, I realized that culturally it's not a good fit for me. And so again, resigning without having any push factors involved takes a lot of courage. But again, at the time, yeah, well, I mean, it's not for me, so I might as well just, throw my hat into the ring for another opportunity and resign from here.
It's really a good reminder when we look at somebody else's career and we think about their choices. A lot of times we just think about maybe the person, the professional that we see. We're not thinking about what are their obligations, their social familiar obligations. And so it might look glamorous or it might look like somebody is stuck, but we don't know why they're choosing what they're choosing or how free they may feel or be to make these different kinds of choices. And I think that's always a good reminder to think about, well, what kind of life do I want? What are my obligations? What do I want my obligations to be? And then finding and thinking about career that matches those.
Absolutely, which is one of the main reasons I actually said goodbye to my very successful corporate career at the height of my career. And I had no idea how this is going to work out. Quite literally, I had no idea. But I thought to myself, I mean, I was close to turning 50. I thought, you know what? I've been working as an expat for 20 plus years. You build also some financial independence in all those years. And if that doesn't work out after a year or two, I can always go back to a corporate role. But again, on my end, this was, in the middle of the pandemic, and it was a bit of a strange time anyway for most of us. But I really felt on my vision board, I had this one statement next to many other images, if not now, when? And that really stuck with me for some time because in January 22, I had my book launched, and it became such a sensational, unexpected success that it really forced my hand in a way, in a nice way, to go and do what I truly love rather than doing what I liked and paid the bills and everything else, but wasn't really my true calling, also in hindsight.
So you left the corporate world to start your own executive coaching practice?
Correct. Yeah, that was close to 4 years ago.
So when you left, you said you weren't sure what you were going to. So had you been coaching before? Was it something that you were kind of thinking about, or how did you find that that's what you decided you wanted to do?
Yes. So that it was easy for me to know what I would like to do. It wasn't as easy to know whether it's going to pay for the life
Right.
and the mortgage and everything else. So I had been coaching on the side for about 8 years. And my main motivation at the time when I embarked on my coach education training, of which I spent a significant part also in the US. So I did a good part of it in San Francisco and another year in Washington, D.C. So it was a truly international program. But I had been coaching on the side for about 8 years. And I think when the book launched and it became an international bestseller, it became a number one new release on Amazon, I had all this energy coming my way, Mary. I mean, I had random people hitting me up and saying, hey, we got our leadership conference coming up on this date, and we would love to have you come and speak to our leaders. I'm a podcast host. I would like to have this interview with you. I am looking after coaching in our organization. I would love to get you in and do this workshop for us. And so it quickly dawned on me that there is no way in the world I could make it all work all at the same time. So one thing had to go, and that was my full-time role because all the other exciting activities eventually amounted to more than a full-time role.
I love that story. I just this morning I was watching a video and somebody was talking about luck and what luck is. And a lot of times we think, I'm just going about my business and lucky me, something falls in my lap. But they're saying, this person was saying, no, luck is being out there, putting yourself out there, looking at what you want, making those connections. And then many times it's that person that you didn't know, but because you've been out, then you do make this lucky connection or this thing that just sort of happens. And I love that, right? This idea that instead of this passive, oh, I wish I could do this, and so I just wait until somebody sees my brilliance, but this idea of putting yourself out there, having a vision board, thinking about what it is you want, and when you see the stars aligning, doing something about it, taking that chance. It's a big leap because once you have all of those obligations, the mortgage and whatnot, it feels differently to pursue that thing that you just really want to go after.
Absolutely. And what I would love to add to what you said is hopefully you are also a little prepared to
Yes.
meet your luck as and when it's meeting you, right? And that's
Right.
the other thing, right? I mean, if you never spend time to think about what you may want to do next, then you don't even know if the next thing that's coming your way is made for you or not. And
Yeah.
so there's that bit as well as, of course, yeah, we all get lucky. Like with the book, I just got lucky. I had no idea how well it will do. It did exceptionally well, and it continues to do exceptionally well. I mean, just last year, it was 3 times in the number one selling charts on Amazon, more than 3 years after the original publishing date. And I have zero spend on the book. I don't do advertisements or Google, whatever, AdWords and this and that. It's become a bit of an evergreen book now. And it's just doing very well on its own. And so again, it took me 7 years to write this book, right? And it was hard work. It was a lot harder than I imagined in my wildest dreams. Also because I was in a full-time role. I was flying all over the world. I was coaching on the side. I was writing a little bit on the side. I was doing some keynote speeches a year. I did have family. And so, how how much time have we got at any given day? And so it partially took that long because life was full on for me, personally and professionally, but also because I didn't want to, and I still have these people hitting me up on LinkedIn mainly saying, hey, have you considered writing a book? We will come and interview you for a day and we'll create a book out of it. Well, firstly, I'm not sure I would have that many interesting stories to share over a course of a full day and then making a book out of it. But even if I did, I doubt that that sort of a book is gonna go places the way this book did. And so it took me 5 years to do the research alone and to really ground what I'm sharing with the world right now in the practical way that is deeply theoretically grounded. So it just all takes time, and I was happy to invest the time because I had an end goal in mind, and the end goal was that I want to write a book with my name on it that I would gladly pass on to my children and grandchildren and so on. So something that is here to stay, not something that kind of goes up and one day and the next day nobody talks about it anymore.
I love so much of what you said. I mean, first of all, having a goal so you know where you're trying to go, and then finding the time because you've decided that that's important to you, right? Important enough. There's a lot of things we want to do, but they just don't bubble up because it takes time, because it takes effort, because it's difficult. But that's another lesson. It's not only having a goal, but things that you want to do that are worth doing. Sometimes it's really quick, but many times, like learning a skill or writing a book can be quite arduous. I write as well. And so people will ask me about, oh, I've got this idea, or what do you think about this? And my belief with writing is you write because you write, right? That's how it works. You just keep on doing it. And then where you're doing the research, you're working towards it. And every time I sit down to write, I think, well, progress. Progress is just in the mindset of the desire, but having this goal. And I want to talk about your book, but it really did make me think about one of the first questions I ask my clients when I'm an ombuds at the university here, University of Tennessee at Martin. And one of the first things after I hear what's going on, I ask them, well, what is it that you want? And a lot of times people know what they don't want. Completely understand when you're in pain, when something is going on, you don't want that. But it's quite different to be trying to go away from something than going towards something. And I think that's just really important in our careers or what it is that we want. What are we going towards? So if you want to talk on that, but I want to hear about your book, Mastering Executive Transition. So this is the book we've been talking about. So either one, where would you like to start?
Well, I mean, I can come back to what you said initially, and you will be surprised, Mary, that even at the C-suite executive level, sometimes I have those kind of conversations with them. So someone with a very established career, someone with a great track record, just looking at it from an external perspective. And then once you are in a coaching conversation and all those um, insecurities, anxieties, dissatisfaction bubbles up, that gets you into a nice conversation as to, okay, so this has been like your life, corporate life, professional life for the last 20, 30 years. Where do you want to take it for the next 10 years, which is probably the last chapter of your professional life? And so that really is a super exciting part of what I do because, of course, we can go back and look at all the mistakes that I've made and what have you, and why they are where they are today. But really, I think what is a lot more compelling and exciting is to co-create or help them to find that, future self, the future kind of work that they would love to be doing. And it may or may not be a job title, right? It may be what is often considered as a portfolio style career, which is a bit of project work, a little bit of consulting, advisory work, some mentorship, maybe some teaching at university, maybe some networking. So whatever that mix is, or that, those skills and activities, it's never too late to sit down and talk to your coach and really try to imagine for yourself a more engaged, bright, and exciting future. And then once that is a little clearer, that then gives you something to work towards. And then that becomes a lot easier to start to plan for it than to not know what you truly want, but just be unhappy with the current role that you're in, right? Which is kind of the same analogy, just at a much later stage in one's professional life.
That word you used is so strong, dissatisfaction. right? And if you don't know that you're dissatisfied, but you're just sort of going along, that's going to come out. It's going to come out in a variety of ways. It might come out in stress. It might come out in the decisions that you make at work or at home or both. But that clarity of where I've been, but I think more importantly, as you've been talking about, where am I going? What is it that I want? What do I want? I mean, all roles and power is temporary, right? And so if we can sort of right size where we are right now and try to figure out, well, what does bring me joy? What does bring me meaning? And is that being here in this role? And this is what I want to be doing for the foreseeable future? Or, as you said, a variety of things or transitioning into something else. But if we don't know, if we don't have that clarity of thought, then it's really hard to artfully arrange our time and the things that we do in an efficient, fulfilling way because we don't know exactly what we're going towards.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, well, I mean, you already gave away the title, so it really is what it says on the tin. The book is all about how can you be more intentful and structured when you are moving into a table stakes type executive position. And to my surprise, at the time when I started doing the research, the only book that really, spoke about onboarding in a broader sense was the first 90 days, which is funny because that same book has the subtitle Critical Onboarding Strategies for Leaders at All Levels. And so, again, I have worked for too long in the people function to know that if a book has been written for a general audience, it is definitely not going to be fit for purpose for an executive level audience. And so I started to do the research to see, okay, what are the books that have been written on this topic? And believe it or not, I mean, there wasn't a single book. Now, the good news is since my book launched 4 years ago now, 4 years and 2 months ago, there have been three other books published on the same topic. And all three of those books look at the same topic through the lens of the CEO. So one is called The Life Cycle of a CEO. And that one is written by a gentleman called Claudius Hildebrand. He's a German guy based in the US, a search firm partner, a headhunter. The other one is written by another senior search firm partner, headhunter, based in the UK, but originally from Australia, Ty Wiggins. And his book is titled The New CEO. And it is a very recent book that's been added. I have not read that one yet. It's written by four McKinsey partners, and it looks at the seasons, the 4 seasons of a CEO. So it's with delight to see that somehow my book also triggered a bit of a movement and really opened this field to something that is happening a gazillion times over in
Mhm.
corporate America, in the world, all over. And yet nobody has, for whatever reason, found that to be an interesting, exciting, or a worthwhile topic to sit down, do the research, and then come up with a framework as to, okay, if I'm an executive leader and I wanted to do this properly and thrive in my new role, how can I go about doing that? And this is what the book is all about. So it's generally kind of four parts of the book. The first one is the introduction, why this is a worthwhile topic. Um, and what's been the history of transitions, generally speaking. The second part looks at what goes wrong. Why do 4 out of 10 not make it, which is a shockingly high failure rate? And what are the top 10 reasons for executive transition failure? Then the third part, which is the main chunk of the book, really looks at, okay, what are some proven interventions that work in our executive kind of careers. And in that part, I also speak about the double diamond framework of executive transitions, which is kind of my framework that I introduced to the world. And the last chapter is a super exciting one. If you were to Google, and this is now 5 years old, this information is 5 years old. In the year 2020, Mary, if you were to Google um, how to most effectively how to go into your first 90 days in a structured way with impact and do this effectively. At that time, you got over 5 billion search results on Google. If you were to change the word first with last and then hit search, you would find less than 50 million results, which is super interesting because, for me, of course, if you're the newly CEO of whatever the name of the organization is, there are many things you can do to help your own onboarding. But what about the person you're taking over from? How can you connect the two and how can they give you a leg up so that you don't have to, have the same hardship as they faced it when they came to the position? And so that's what's the last chapter all about. It's about your last 90 days in an executive role and what are the kind of things you may want to consider doing with your incoming executive, with your successor in a way.
Hmm. I love that so much because in my work in conflict, when it comes to leadership, I see so much. Obviously there's all of this talent, but when it comes to what I'm interested in is this people function of um, how do I have a healthy work environment, which from my lens, what I'm interested in is how do I help people disagree well? How do I help people? How do people dialogue? And so there is there's not much. I mean, there are books, of course, on conflict management, negotiation, and all that kind of stuff, but the practical really thinking about me and the concrete and how I am onboarding and how I'm going to lead these people. And as you're talking about how I'm going to leave these people and really thinking about how to disagree well and how to set your team up for success so that we can really have engagement. Um, the more we have in that space for leaders to lead well, to really bring that out of their employees, the people that are with them, um, all the employees say thank you. Thank you, because I think a lot of leaders, I mean, I haven't done the research that you have, but a lot of what I see is not from lack of care or sincerity. It's lack of skill. They don't know. Many people are conflict avoidant and just feel uncomfortable. I mean, when you look at all the money that is just burned on the pyre of not wanting to deal with conflict, um, it's just, how it makes people feel. Some people, not everybody, but so anything that's going to help people, leaders, develop those skills so that they can lead their team, whether it be small, another group of executives who are then leading the bulk, or if they're middle management or wherever they may be.
Absolutely. I mean, what you just said brought up two things for me. One is a diagnostic I took many, many years ago. It's called the Thomas Kilmann
Yes.
instrument, TKI, and I have used that many years ago as an HRD, as an HR director, when we had team building and offsites and the like. And it's really fascinating to see that there is no single style of managing conflict that is superior to any of the others. And as with everything else in life, there is very little black and white. So usually the score distributes among the five stars. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the other part of my coaching practice. So 80% of my time, I work with executives that are going into a new position, a new C-suite executive role. And the other 20% is what I do with intact leadership teams. So I coach the entire team rather than coaching every single member of a leadership team. And one of the two instruments that I use in that team journey product of mine is Dr. Patrick Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And the second part of the pyramid, so I have to imagine the pyramid like that. The lower part looks at trust. The second part looks at conflict. The third part looks at commitment. The fourth part looks at accountability. And the top part of the pyramid, it's all about results. And it's super interesting for me that I have seen both sides of conflict. So I worked with a Swiss executive team. I won't mention the name of the company, but it's actually quite ingrained in the Swiss culture that a bit like the English or the British culture where you don't have necessarily conflict in the open public. And I mean, the British have found their own ways to pack it all up in between the lines. and not really stated, obviously. But this particular leadership team, consisting of 14 executive leaders, just seemed to be getting on very well with one another in the boardroom. But then they would have the conflict behind the scenes. So they would go back from their board meetings when they had to agree on something, and then there were a number of people who were for this initiatives, others were against. And then there was a decision taken, and the majority said, let's go ahead and do it. And then that meant that two or three of those executive team members would go back to their own functional teams and say, I was with Mary and the CEO in this meeting. I actually voted against this initiative, but I was overruled, which essentially signaled to their teams that if my boss is not really behind this, if he or she isn't fully bought into this idea, why would we need to drop the ball and give this our utmost attention and energy? So I've seen that side of it in that particular team, but I've seen also the other side of it where there are companies that are famous for this. Reckitt Benckiser is one of those where you are encouraged to kind of kill one another in those meetings verbally, and it's all about making sure that you have healthy conflict. But the reality is that I don't think any one of these two extremes works well,
Mhm.
and that's what Lencioni is suggesting in that part of the pyramid. And the idea is not you either have conflict or don't have conflict, but the idea is to put the energy and the conflict to make sure that, let's say, it's about the product launch, that this product launch is a successful one, and not, oh, Mary disagreed with me. That means that she's in it for me, or she always disagrees with me, and this was just another time where she proved me wrong in front of my peers.
Mhm.
And so it really is to get the balance right, meaning not being fearful of conflict and not having conflict all the time, but spending the energy and disagreeing with one another to make this a better product, to make the process more robust, to make this a more helpful undertaking. And that's the other part that came up for me when you mentioned the word conflict.
Yeah, this idea of the problem is the problem, not the person. But a lot of times what we end up doing is we end up saying, no, no, it's the person, right? They're a train wreck. They are against me. They are whatever. And then now I'm ruminating about their personality or about their choices, or instead of the problem. And like you said, all this wasted energy. So we see this all the time. Um, and it seems like it's going to take a lot of emotional maturity that if I find somebody who constantly is disagreeing with or wanting to stop whatever initiative that I have put forward, to not see it as they're trying to stop me, but rather the problem. In particular, if the other person I am perceiving is really does. I feel like they have it out for me and they are trying to get at me. So, how do you? I mean, of course, the best practice is the problem, not the person. And in reality, we have so many personal attacks, gossiping, and all this other kind of stuff.
Mhm.
How do you? I've been saying recently, because I have a whole soapbox about gossiping, that it's this huge red flag, which is really good information about what's going on, but that it's only going on because it's allowed to go on. It's just very destructive and takes away from any healthy work environment. So, how do you coach, or what advice do you have for leaders to help people have healthy conflict in the right way at the
Mhm.
right time about the right things?
Sure. So this is what I love about this particular instrument, the Patrick Lencioni
Hmm.
Five Dysfunctions of a Team, because what it does is essentially it consists of 37 questions in those five categories. And so in the area of conflict, there are seven unique questions that are posed to each member of the team, and they all take the assessment individually. And then what it does is it plays it back to you. So one of the items is using strong language when you're upset. And then there are three ways you can say it's perfectly acceptable. For me, it's perfectly acceptable. Or you could say it's tolerable. It's not my preferred way of doing, but hey, I could understand how sometimes people get very emotional or passionate. And then the third column is wholly unacceptable. And what is super interesting for me is using a recent example of a leadership team I did this exercise with. 9 of the 11 member team said that this is unacceptable. Two said it's tolerable. But then the assessment also asks the individual to say, um, do you admit to have done this at work previously? So 3 people admitted, oh, actually, I have done this, although none of them said this is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. So what is acceptable behavior during conflict really varies from team to
Yes.
team. So that's just one item.
Yeah.
The next item is expressing anger through indirect actions rather than voicing it directly,
Mhm.
meaning, you can show anger through body language. I think the female executives are particularly good at that. To really show you that they are upset with what you just said or wholly disagree with what you're saying right now. 7 said it's unacceptable. 4 said it's tolerable. Nobody said it's perfectly acceptable, and yet 4 members of that leadership team have demonstrated this behavior.
Mhm.
Raising your voice when you get passionate. 5 said it's unacceptable. 6 said tolerable. Still 0 individuals said it's perfectly acceptable. And 3 said, I've done this. Now that gets us into the next part of the survey, which is excluding other team members from difficult conversations. So this is kind of the passive aggressive way to say, oh, I really dislike inviting Navid to this team meeting because I know he's going to disagree with me. I really don't like to see that. So I'm going to just exclude him from this or not invite him along. 5 said unacceptable, 3 said tolerable, and 3 said perfectly acceptable. So now you have this imbalance, the 5 and the 3. I mean, the 3 can work on both sides
Right.
of the equation. But now you have this 5 against the 3. And 4 individuals say, yeah, absolutely, I've done this at work. Next item, avoiding someone when you're angry. So not only excluding them from difficult conversations, but completely avoiding them. So if I see Mary is ringing me up, I'm just gonna let it ring out and go to my voice box, and I will never return her call. If she sends me an email or someone in her team sends me an email, I will just ignore that and pretend it's gone into my junk folder. The next one is being outwardly emotional. And the last item on that same conflict measure is going beyond the meeting end time to resolve an issue. So you see, you have already 7 items that make up the total score of healthy conflict or constructive conflict, as Patrick Lencioni calls it, in this particular part of the survey. But it's also looking at how many people say it's unacceptable, how many say it's perfectly acceptable, what is the delta there, as well as how many of the team members have admitted to be doing this. And that then becomes, this is undeniable facts. It's what the team has said about their own conflict management styles. And now we are into a coaching conversation with everyone in the room without knowing who said what to say, okay, let's have a conversation around this particular part, which is excluding other team members from difficult conversations. Can you cite a recent example of that? Or how do you feel when you are being excluded? Or how do you feel when you think that you have to exclude someone from attending a team meeting? And then we work with what is in the room, right? So I'm always a big fan of let's just look at the facts first. Let's establish the data source, and then let us connect and see what it tells us and how we can improve based on what we know is already existing in the room. And what the survey does is very nice. It has thresholds. So that means that the pyramid will be spitted out in a color, in the red, green, yellow color vision. And so that means that every team will know immediately, okay, when it comes to these 5 areas, this is the 1 or 2 areas we are exceptionally good at. This is the 1 or 2 areas we are really not great at. And this is the one area that is clearly a development area, and we need to focus on that.
I have read the book, right? A great book. And when I hear what you're saying, because a lot of times when I'm working with organizations, right, we think about, having these conversations because it's about these people at this time in this group. How are we going to work together? How are we going to have this dialogue? And I'm also cognizant of how free people are to tell the truth, right? Because
Mhm.
like when we think about how people are showing up to work and everything that they have done and has happened to them and how that level of trust, right? That baseline that skews everything about what we're going to do. I'm always curious as to those kind of surveys when people are responding. Are they responding with what they think needs to be said or what they think others want to hear? Or, I mean, and I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. I mean, people are going to say what they're going to say, but I do wonder if it's always really the truth. And so we are working with what people have said, but it's not always what's going on.
Mm. Well, the good thing about the survey is that even I, as the administrator of the assessment, cannot see, oh, Mary said this, interesting, and Susan said that, and John said this, and Mary said that. No, it only spits out a team report, and the team report is the aggregate of the responses. And what I love about this particular instrument is that, firstly, it gives you your scores and how you have scored. And then it says, okay, if this team were to establish conflict at a more comprehensive level, at a more proficient level, what are some of the ideas you have about improving conflict on
Mhm.
your leadership team? And then it gives you items to rank, top rank from. And there's a multiple choice. You can select as many items as you like. So not only does it give you the data point to say in this particular team, conflict was yellow. So it wasn't great, but it wasn't also very poor. But yellow means there's definitely room for improvement. It then becomes an interesting conversation to see, oh, 9 individuals out of 11 have suggested that this is what we need to do more of. This is the second highest ranked item around how we can focus on, making sure that we are more inclusive in our invites or whatever it is. So it really is also helping you, not just getting your temperature check and saying, oh, your blood results are really poor, but it actually gives you ideas around, okay, if you wanted to improve your blood results, these are the things that the team itself has said, ranked by how many times a certain item has been mentioned to do. And coming back to what you said about are people really open also in the room to start to have the conversation? I find, Mary, that you have the full spectrum in every room
Yeah.
present. So you have one or two members of a 10 or 12 member team that are super cautious and careful with what they say, how they say it, and so on. And then you got one or two that are absolutely courageous or careless and just break out and state things as they are, as they feel they
Mhm.
are.
Mhm.
And then you have the rest of the room that can move up or down. And so
Yeah.
it also comes down to what is the skill of the coach in the room? What is the established history of this leadership team working together?
Yeah.
If it's a brand new leadership team, there may be a little more people sitting on the cautious side. If it's a team that's been going on for some years and most of the team members have been part of the team for 3+ years, generally there's a much more higher degree of openness to put the elephant on the table and call it an elephant and then start to think about, okay, how do we go about eating this elephant in small chunks and pieces.
I love what you're saying because I feel of two minds about instruments. But as you're talking, I think, well, we have to start a dialogue. And I know, like with mediation, somebody will present with one thing. This is the problem. But once we've been talking for a while, that's not really the problem. And this is when I first started doing, I'm like, oh, goodness. But no, this is just as it is, right? People have got to start someplace. And then through the conversation, as they elicit, they can find out and they're able to talk about what's really going on. And so think anything that can start that conversation. And what you're talking about is that starting it at a really high level with getting a lot of things out. But another thing that you're highlighting that I hope everyone listening will resonate with is that conflict is always particular. What it is, how to deal with it in a respectful, artful, professional way that is engaging and it brings about psychological safety, all of that. Conflict is not some external puzzle. It has to do with the people, the situation, the structure that, as you just said, all of these different variables go into how we're going to deal with conflict, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, given this group, this culture, this time, the tenor of what it is that we're doing. And so that means that we have to get in rooms and have conversations. We have to set expectations. Or, like with the Thomas Kilmann, what I love about it when I use it is to help people just jar themselves out of thinking that everybody deals with conflict the way that I do, or that there is one legitimate way, or that I always deal with conflict in one way, right? And so to start opening your imagination to see the variedness of how things come to you, how you react, how other people react. And all of that is such good information to do the next. Okay, so let's figure out what is going on so that we can decide what are some durable solutions so that we can solve this problem and have a healthy work environment where everybody's respected.
Absolutely. And what this brings up for me is a memory. I once did the same work with another leadership team. And what I typically do ahead of the actual offsite, I share the report with the CEO and the CHRO. So those are the only two individuals on any leadership team that get 24-hour privileged access to the report. And then the next day, I will open the report and everyone will get to see for the first time what are our results. And this particular team had two issues, one on conflict and one on trust. Both of those areas were red. And the first thing that the CEO said to me on the call, this was done in virtually, I had not traveled to the location yet. He said, "This is so interesting because I think this report is wholly wrong. We don't have any trust issues at all in our leadership team." And he was obviously not happy with the results.
Yeah.
And then he went on to say a few things and cite his own data points around why he believes that trust is amazing in his leadership team. And then the CHRO was very quietly listening, as a wise CHRO usually does, lets the leader to come out first and then comes with the reality sense check on the back end. And then I said, look, I just want to remind you, and dear CEO, that this survey was taken by your leadership team members, 12 of them, and everyone has participated. So it's not like my sense making of, oh, I somehow feel there is an issue with trust in your team. This is you,
Right.
this other CHRS on the call, and the other
Yeah.
10 folks who have, yeah, said those things. And so if I were to give you advice as your coach and someone that wants to do this work with all of you, my first advice for you would be to start to accept the reality of what the team has said about the state of the team.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean it's irrecoverable. It doesn't mean that there's nothing we can do here. We can do a ton. But really, the first step, I think, for you is to start accepting the results. And then we dig deeper and see, okay, what are some of the root causes? How come that I feel that we can have great conflicts? And well, pretty much nobody else seems to agree with me on this
Mhm.
one. And so it's really acceptance is really sometimes the hardest step first, particularly for the business leader who somehow feels an ownership, a sense of ownership for this leadership team, rightly so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's data, you cannot tweak data. It's data as data. Yeah.
I love that because I can imagine the CEO that you're talking about, um, who, really thinks everything is going well. And if I think everything is going well, then I'm operating with that assumption. I think like with conflict, many times somebody will be in conflict with another person and they're telling me about it. And then maybe we do a facilitated conversation or something like that, and the other person doesn't know there's a problem, right? Because so I have this conflict with this other person, and certainly they know about it. Certainly they're doing this thing. They are poking me, they're antagonizing me. The other person doesn't even know there's a problem, right? And so we can't fix something that we don't know about. And if we are just operating in very different ways, we're going to just see different things, talk past each other, maybe even use the same words, but we have these different assumptions. And so one of the best gifts a leader can have is self-reflection, right? To really see the lay of the land. And sometimes that is hard if the system is set up so that everybody is masking, they're shellacking, and then no one's telling you
Mm.
the truth, which is highly problematic.
Absolutely. And I think just to complete this one case study, that individual, the CEO, had no issue to, disagree with anyone. Well, you're the CEO anyway.
Right.
So everyone else is reporting to you. So there is this line conflict
Yeah.
that, just goes one way. And so yeah, I mean, for me, it's ultimately the spectrum, right? On one hand, on one side, you have artificial harmony where there's like
Hmm.
literally zero conflict
Yeah.
in the room, which was the Swiss example. And then you have other teams who are more towards aggressive and destructive politics, which is like extreme conflict,
Yeah.
right? And so again, the healthy middle is probably what you should aim for. But also, if you want to sit more on the right or on the left side of the spectrum, that's also determined by your leadership team because the survey asks them, what would you consider to be acceptable level of conflict? And if they believe the majority that this is an acceptable level of conflict, who am I to come in and say, oh, but you need to moderate down a little more, or you need to move more towards the harmonic, whatever state of a leadership team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always a good lesson that this is not about me, the person who's coming in, the coach, the trainer. It's about them and who are they and what do they want and how are they working together. One thing that we're doing this year on Conflict Manage is we're talking about multi-generational workplaces. And I mean, you have the advantage of international and multi-generational workplaces. So when you think about conflict at work and we have, all different ages at work and people are just coming in. We think about where people are when it comes to the digital divide or things that have happened in world politics or even COVID, right? Some young professionals, their normal was going to work during the pandemic, and so everybody's remote. There's all these different sorts of set points. What do you see that leaders can do to really embrace and not minimize people in different generations, to embrace them, help them be engaged?
Mm, that's a big one, Mary.
Just a little question here at the end.
Yeah, yeah, and I love the question, and I love the notion of I mean, it's not typically my client group. So when I work with intact leadership teams or executive leaders, they are usually 20, 25 years of professional work experience. So that's kind of the typical audience that I deal with. But that being said, I've also worked in HR for a long time. And so I've had these experiences coming my way. And so what I would say to that is the following. So, firstly, we have by now six generations at work, and that's something very, very unique. So, from the traditionalists to the baby boomers to Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, and whatever the Gen Z is that the latest?
Gen Z,
That
well, then alphas are
Gen
below
Z,
them, but
yeah,
they're not quite in the workplace, but yeah.
yeah. So you have 5 to 6 different populations, demographics at work. And so when I think about the various acceptable levels for each of those on something like problem solving, I could see how for a traditionalist, when it comes to effective problem solving, it's all hierarchically managed. So
Mhm.
if my boss tells me this is the way to go and I actually have a different opinion, well, he or she is my boss, so I better just zip up and just get on with it. When it comes to a boomer, I think it's more a horizontal kind of view. Okay, let's discuss this among ourselves and let's decide what is the best course of action going forward, and we're gonna settle it just like that. When it comes to Gen X, which is yeah, kind of my generation, problem solving or conflict management is more independently seen. So it's like because I like it to be like this, or because Mary likes it to be that. So that may get us into a little bit of a trouble. And then Gen Y, funnily enough, is more collaborative when it comes to that. I mean, you look at all the movements, the Friday whatever movements, and all the other, Greenpeace, this, that. They just have found a way to organize themselves around those topics. And I have no idea how it works with the millennials and the rest, but the reality is, if all you produce as a business is vanilla ice cream, you will be out of business very quickly because maybe the Gen Z or the millennials prefer, salted caramel with whatever, organic milk. And the traditionalist says, well, good old chocolate ice cream is good enough for me. Why would I bother about all the other variances? And so it's the same analogy. So if whether it's conflict management, problem solving, or whatever other methods you look at, I think you ought to tailor it to the various different demographics that you have in a business. And you have to bear that in mind when you want to move ahead. That will be kind of my high level idea around how to work with the different demographics in the workforce on key topics like learning style, communication, problem solving, decision making, feedback, right? There's various attitudes towards giving and receiving feedback. And for the traditionalists, it's no news is good news. Whereas for the Gen Y and the millennials, it's more like Instagram, like tweet, if I don't get 3 times praise from my boss, I need to worry because something clearly is not landing. So that will be my idea about
Yeah.
this.
I think it also kind of just resonates with what we were talking about, in the C-suite, that if you're thinking about conflict, it's well, conflict here and what is tolerated or what is accepted or what is seen as good practice, but having that dialogue. And I think with just generations at work, it's the same, just in a maybe a different kind of structure of we want a diversity of age and experience and thought and all the different kinds that we can get so that we can serve our population, so that we can be engaged, so that we can do the best of whatever thing that we're doing. And so we need to not just make our workplaces for that one, right, as you were saying, but really look and see how does we want to communicate? Okay, but communication means the other person's receiving the message. How are these people receiving messages? Um, and so if we need feedback, we always need feedback. What is the way in which we'll actually get the feedback? And so let's not just be so stout on this one way of delivering. Like what is the goal? What is the end result that you want? Is the end result that you want to say it this way, present it this way, or do you want it to be heard and acted on? Right. And so I think adjusting our expectations, I think the constant dialogue that we need to have with one another. I see our time is running out, so I have one last question for you. As you look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all people be treated with dignity and respect, but they'll be encouraged to thrive and flourish?
Wow, I mean, for me, it boils down to the core philosophy of being seen and heard and respected. It really, I mean, it sounds simple, but my God, it's so difficult to establish, especially if you look at sizable businesses
Mhm.
where you don't necessarily have the deep connection with the founder and CEO, and you're just 7 layers down from the regional whatever president. And so that really does it for me. I don't think,
Mhm.
I mean, AI is a big topic these days. And of course, a lot of people are worried about the impact of AI on leadership, on the work place, and all that. And I think trends like this, and whether technological or other trends, will come and go. But really, for me, if a business spends a little bit of time and attention to get those core principles right, everything else flows from there.
That's a perfect way to end this conversation. I absolutely agree with you. Well, thank you so much for this time and this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Mary, for having me. And I can't wait to get my hand on this episode when it's ready.
Absolutely. Well, take care. Naveed, thank you for an excellent conversation. I really enjoyed this conversation about the kinds of questions that the C-suite should be having. And I think those kinds of questions about conflict and conflict tolerance and what's acceptable versus what we actually do, those are really good questions. I see those as not just for the C-suite, but for all of us and all of our teams. Dialogue is the antidote to unnecessary conflict and to managing our conflict, because we're going to have it. Conflict isn't the problem, it's when it's unmanaged. And the antidote to having to having unmanaged conflict, towards having fruitful conflict, is dialogue. And those sound like really good tools. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back, we have new episodes every Tuesday. If you would like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this, it's much appreciated. And if you haven't checked out my latest book, which is called Winning the Generation Wars at Work, Making Your Age an Asset, it's available on Amazon. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.